Welcome, everyone. My name is John Bailie. I'm the president of the International Institute for Restorative Practices. The IIRP Graduate School is the world's first graduate school wholly dedicated to restorative practices, the science of relationships and community. This conversation is part of a new series that we're calling 3 Questions, where I'll highlight some new and innovative thinkers and practitioners from the field of restorative practices and beyond, and ask them, you guessed it, 3 questions. Today, it's my pleasure to talk with Steven Lozada. Steven and I met through IIRP's new collaboration with Designed Learning, the educational organization founded by Peter Block, and home to the Flawless Consulting and Structure of Belonging trainings, as well as 6 conversations for leaders and professionals around the world. Steven is also the president and chief coach at Upward Mindset, a consulting firm that specializes in emotional intelligence, motivation, and how values shape leadership and organizational culture. I also attended a course taught by Steven, so I can give my own personal seal of approval and say, in addition to being a wonderful man, Steven also truly practices what he teaches, and is a mentor in every sense of the word. So I had a great experience attending one of his courses in Flawless Consulting. So Steven, I don't know if you want to say anything more about yourself before we get started.
I want to say thank you. That was a kind introduction. I am a happily married husband of 20 years and proud parent of 2 beautiful children here. And those are probably my greatest accomplishments, if ever. My wife once told me, if you could succeed at anything in life, but you failed in marriage, you were a failure. And so I take that very seriously.
Very true. Very true. Thank you. All right. So here's the 3 questions. The first one is, as a leader, what's the difference between influence and control, and why is influence so important, and the ability to exercise influence as a leader?
Yeah. The distinction between those 2 terms, I think, is really critical, particularly in this new world, and this new workplace and new way of being that we're coming into. And I like to look at them separately. Control is also another word, euphemistically manage or management. Is another word for control, which is to stop and start at will. And so when I look at working with other people, I have to ask myself, do I have the power? Do I have the permission to stop and start someone else at will? And it seems to me that historically we've created organizations and management theory around controlling resources. We even came up with a catchy term, human resources. And then we want to apply management theory to people, and I think that that's incorrect. Particularly now, I think we need to start realizing that way of being, of commanding and controlling, is done. And so what can we do instead of trying to control people, trying to control the sources of information and the distribution of information to produce something or to perform an activity? It is to shift to influence. The act of inviting people to discover a way of being that's in their best interest. So is it possible that I can be the type of leader who can present a vision or a mission, invite people to ally with me, to bring their gifts and their talents in the execution of whatever we're going to do together? Number 1, right? We have a shared purpose. But then number 2, do we have a shared promise with one another? And that I think is the secret to high performing, highly successful, restorative teams. To say we're shifting away from commanded control, we're moving to convening and connecting, and we're using influence in order to achieve certain outcomes.
I love that idea of shared promise. I don't know if I've heard that before. That'll be another idea I take from Steven. So when any of you listening to this conversation, when you hear me use that, this is the one time I'll give Steven credit and say I learned it from Steven Lozada. Okay.
That's fair.
All right. Second question. So with that in mind, what skills or competencies would you most recommend that leaders develop in order to exercise greater influence versus control?
Yeah. Let me look at it in 2 ways here. The inner being or the inner core of a person, and the outer core or the outer being of the person. For the inner being, the one thing I'm going to say is humility is a requisite. The humility to appropriately handle our own assumptions. What are the assumptions that I'm making about the person in front of me? What are the assumptions that I have about the system? Um, Chris Argyris talks about this quite a bit in organizational learning, talking about the assumptions that we come in with model 1 and model 2 type of assumptions. And I agree with him. He submits that model 2 assumptions are the ones that lead to learning and development. And the one assumption we should have is assume positive intent in the other. Mm. That requires humility. To say, I'm having a conversation with someone, or we're involved in working on something, and I'm not going to assume that they're trying to sabotage me on purpose or that they are trying to do me harm, but I'm going to approach this in a way where I'm going to check my assumptions. And the first thing I'm going to do is lead with, I'm assuming positive intent. The one example that comes to me really quickly is I remember in school when we would play volleyball. It was not the structured volleyball team, but we just kind of get into a gym and play volleyball. And the ball would come between two players in the front of the net, and both would come at each other and hesitate. And the ball would hit the ground. And then we said, I thought you were going to get it.
Right.
Right. And that happens enough. It starts to build frustration. And then you start to think, well, they're doing this on purpose. That spirals out of control. So I would say that the first thing is humility, to recognize our assumptions, process them effectively in order to produce learning. That's the inner core. The outer core, I would say, are conversational competencies. Words create worlds. I learned that from the late Judith Glaser. She's the author of Conversational Intelligence. I'm also a certified conversational intelligence coach. And I learned that and I espouse that. Words create worlds. With my words, I can create images, feelings, sentiments, even physiological responses. I could talk about a mouth-watering dessert, and by using those words, I create salivation in you. Right? So the words create worlds, and understanding that language is never innocent. Language is action. And so as leaders, to be able to craft our leadership conversationally, to have the competencies to be able to create commitments and move people forward instead of having to defend the past. Yeah. What can we do to create the future and shape it conversationally? For anything that's ever been created and everything that will ever be created from henceforth always begins with a conversation, always. It could be a conversation in the mind, and then we socialize it, but it's a conversation. And being able to learn things like speech acts, the speech acts of assertions, judgments, offers, promises, requests, and having those at hand, I think are really necessary for the future of leadership.
That's fantastic. And I can say in the flawless consulting training, Steven, one of the things that impressed me most, not just about the curriculum, but about you, was how deep we went into that, words create worlds truth, and the recognition of even those of us who do a lot of that work every day, the benefit of practicing intentionally those skills is really amazing. All right. So the third question, in a recent conversation, you said that flawless consulting training helps to create flawless leaders. What does flawless leadership mean to you?
Yeah. It could be a provocative statement indeed. And the term flawless, I'm going to be honest, I struggle. There's a tension inside of me with the term flawless. It is the title of one of Peter Black's most influential books, Flawless Consulting, which is now on its third edition. And Peter Black would tell you in a very humble and honest way that was not his title. That title was the publisher's title in order to present this in a very provocative and eye-catching way to sell the material. Right. But we've still embraced it. Flawless, right? To be without blemish, to be without fault, to be without defects. Probably not something that we can claim to have as leaders, as the noun of leader. I am not without blemish, defect, or fault. However, we do want to embrace the term flawless in terms of flawless, which is about having a systemic and socialized approach to reacting, responding, and reflecting so we can make continuous improvements. So can I see in my time of reacting, can I look at the way I react to something and stop and think, what are the faults and blemishes of that reaction? Can can I stop and think about what type of response I'm going to give in a particular situation? And can I find the faults and blemishes of that? And can I take time to be attentive and aware and reflect on what the impact that has in a social setting, so then I can start to continually make improvements. So as I look at that as a system, I'm okay with embracing flawless leadership
Yeah.
in that it's an ongoing practice. Leadership as I call it a performing art. It's both art and science, right? And so can we create a socialized system in order to react, respond, and reflect, and generate a worthy outcome collectively? That would be flawless leadership for me.
Excellent. Thank you. That's brilliant. So what should people do if they want to learn more about you or your work, whether with Upward Mindset or with design learning?
Yeah. You can visit my website at upwardmindset.com. I've been slow to put out some of my thought leadership. Honestly, I've spent many years consuming content.
Okay, good.
And
Well, hopefully this helps then. So
yeah, yeah, indeed. I think this is going to be a great step forward in that, because now I'm moving from consumption to contribution.
right.
And so that's what I'm doing. So you can find my contact information there at upwardmindset.com. And the one thing I would do is invite everyone who's able to see this and watch this to consider joining a flawless consulting program that IIRP is going to be offering throughout this year in 2021. And depending on the response, I'm sure we'll consider what it looks like into the future and developing from there. So it would be great to meet you all there and share in a space of learning together, if you can.
All right, excellent. So what Steven mentioned at the end there, if you go to iirp.edu and click on the continuing education link, you'll find that we're offering some flawless consulting training in 2021. And then the first few are going to be offered by Steven himself. So it's a rare opportunity. I've done it myself, and I can say it was really formative. It not only changed how I operate as a coach and a consultant, but really made me take a look at my practice as a leader too. So I think you'll find it beneficial for both those reasons. So Steven, thank you for joining us today. This was a great conversation. It's always a pleasure to spend time with you, and I hope we can have lunch again sometime soon too.
I do too. Thank you so much, John. It was a pleasure.
All right, sir. Thank you.